So we're moving now into our final session of the morning, which is called Meeting the Esports Challenge, which I think is a remarkable way of sort of framing not just the session, but also the morning, because it's clear there are many things that we can do, many things that have been done. But I think also for me, one of the key themes for this morning is just how esports are transgressing boundaries in education, and how we see hearing people like Andrew talk about coming out of robotics, hearing people like William talk about coming out of media and cinema studies, and all this space is populated by these range of professionals. And so our next speaker for this session is Emma Liston, who's another pioneer, a music teacher, Alva Academy, who's going to talk to us about setting up their esports team. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to have you. Over to you.
Fabulous. So I guess I should just introduce myself first. My name is Emma Liston. Actually, it's funny. I've been watching people talk about coming from computing, coming from robotics. I'm actually a music teacher. So that's just going on that fact that, it doesn't have to be from these sort of gaming sort of things that you would associate with gaming. We just sort of created an esports team because there was so much demand. And being a gamer myself, I played games from a very young age, and I was on a university esports team, when I was training to be a teacher. And I always thought to myself, why is this not something that you do in school? Because I wouldn't have even known about university esports if it wasn't for how well it was promoted in my university, because it's something that you just never heard of in school. So I'm just going to let you know how we started up. And my hope is that more schools will pop up around Scotland with esports teams that we can play against. That would be my absolute dream. So first off, I know that the biggest challenge that anyone who's starting a secondary school esports team will come across is the stigma of gaming. People actively discourage young pupils from gaming. It's never, it shouldn't be something that is discouraged completely. I think it's like we said, everything in moderation. So the benefits that I have actively seen so far, and this is around the whole school, not just to the pupils, but for the pupils, you get those career opportunities in esports. I mean, we know that esports as an industry is growing exponentially, especially because we've all been stuck at home. And it's one of those big things that it's not been sort of affected as negatively as other industries have. Social and emotional well-being plus confidence. I have seen this in certain pupils who have, joined my club, said, I'm interested in playing this game. Cool, we'll put you on a team. And then they'll sort of start off the sort of first few weeks with, they'll join the calls with their teammates, and they'll be muted, won't really say much. They'll play the game to the point where they are now creating completely new friend groups. They're coming right out of their shell, no longer muted. They're talking away. They're coming up with ideas. They're initiating these chats. And it's that confidence that you get with, quite a lot of other extracurricular clubs, but so many kids just love gaming, and it's such a good way to start off that confidence building. And then just the positive connection to school life. Some kids don't like school, and sometimes it's not the right choice for them, especially when we talk about positive destinations in senior phase. But I've had kids who have said, I would love to stay on to S6, knowing that every year I'm enrolled in this esports team, and I get to play, and I get to compete, and they are so proud to be in that school team for esports. For staff, I've already got a couple members of staff who came to me straight away and said, "Oh, I love Rocket League. I go home and play it to chill out. I go home and play Rocket League to, de-stress after a day of teaching. I would love to do it in school." And I would never have known that if I hadn't started this esports team. So it's actually just a great opportunity for staff to develop a skill in something completely different to what their subject area might be. I think that was a biology science teacher that came up to me, and I thought, okay, that's strange. It's not something that you usually associate with a science teacher. But it just shows that, we're everywhere. We're cropping up all over the place. And also a big thing for me is building relationships with pupils. it is so hard to build relationships with pupils on the best of times. So getting that common ground of, well, actually, I kind of know about that game that you play, and it's straight away they'll talk for hours about strategy and all this stuff that is really good and great for the brain. And just being able to build that with pupils that you may not even teach it was really good. And through that, I've also created relationships with other esports schools. Right now, it's mostly down in England because there really isn't any other schools in Scotland. This is why we're doing this. I would love to have other schools in Scotland to bounce ideas off of, create tournaments with. But the schools that I have been in touch with in England have been amazing for support and everything that I've done so far. And in terms of just, full school celebration of success, this is a national scale involvement. I know that in my school we have a badge that you get as a pupil if you have nationally competed and you've sort of been under that. I come from Alva Academy. So that's something that a lot of kids who are in my teams don't have, but they will at the end of this year because they've absolutely been competing nationally in the British Esports Association for the past 8 months. So it's all these different routes into success that certain kids may not have managed to get onto if it wasn't for having esports in school. And it's innovative. It's absolutely, it's the new age of, entertainment. It's just fab. So we just want to get that extracurricular development, but in the future, hopefully actually have it in the curriculum. But that is a job for another day. For now, it's absolutely just something that we are trying to build from the ground up. So some people might be thinking, well, why bother? There's so many other extracurricular options. Why this one? So the biggest one for me was demand, and I've said that already. Within a few months, I had 50 plus pupils asking to join the club. So having that absolute demand for what we were doing, that was the biggest part. I said, these kids need this, and that was what drove me to get it done. Of course, the transition, massive part is transition. That college and university life that you have when you go into university and you're playing games, there's nothing like that in schools. So that was the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure that the kids could create those connections, because you might play against them in your school team and get to know them through tournaments and get to know them through lots of different stuff that's going on. And then you already have that connection when you move on to your next set. So it might be college, it might be university, even if it's just going into a job, it's still having those connections so that you can stick with your esports passion. And obviously the health and well-being. It's been said probably to the moon and back today, the health and well-being of playing esports is second to none, especially when these kids are so passionate about it. They want to do it, they want to be there. I've had 100% attendance at all times, and I would be absolutely hard done to do that in my music classes, so they just absolutely adore it. And this is just a couple, just a wee slide that just shows the sheer amount of things that we've managed to do as an esports club in 8 months. 8 months of a pandemic, I would add as well. We are the highest, we've raised the most amount of money for Macmillan in the UK as a secondary school. And we are so proud of that. And this year, that part of the whole school ethos really struggled because people couldn't get out and do bag packing, people couldn't do the usual fundraising. So I said, right, hold my purse. We are going to do a 24-hour live stream, and it was phenomenal. We had kids and players from other teams actually say, well, I know it's an Alva thing, but can we join in? Because we've played your team and we've made these friend connections between players. And we said, absolutely. So we had, I think we had something like 12 kids from the school who did the full 24 hours. We had an extra sort of 10 kids who were jumping in and out. And we had about 5 or 6 kids from other schools who really wanted to be involved as well. And we raised I think it ended up being just over £1,000 for Macmillan. Other things is just, the British Esports, that's our lovely little team, Alva Alliance Esports, sitting there in the top sort of 8 teams out of 75-ish for Rocket League. And it's just things like that, these kids are so proud of that. So proud of that. It is a massive achievement for them. And the confidence that comes with that, and the sense of pride is second to none. And this is just a little couple things that my pupils have said. I said, look, I'm going to talk to some fabulous people about the esports that we do, but you guys know more than I do about what it's actually helped you with. I said to them, if you could describe what the esports team has done for you, that would be amazing for me. I can pass it on to all these other schools who may be thinking of doing it. And just I'll leave it up, but just a couple of my favourite ones, I'm able to coach my friends to help them get better at a game, which for me is such a rewarding feeling. So that's beyond just that pupil likes to play games. They're now getting into coaching. They're learning about all the different things that they need to do to successfully teach someone something. And this is just an avenue for them to do that. It's really benefited me, my social life as a shy person, to talk to new people. All that kind of stuff is what we're doing it for, And some of my favourite memories were created playing with my team and in the casual club that we run on a Friday. I know for a fact that when I was in university, some of my favourite memories came from my League of Legends team and playing with them and having that bond with them. And that was something that I wanted to recreate for the kids in my school. So successful, I would say, for the pupils. The main challenge, securing your support. I'm hoping that what I've sort of put out here for you will help if you're sitting there thinking, I really want to do this, but I don't know how to approach senior management. It's all about the benefits, it's all about the opportunities, and it's all about the pupils at the end of the day. And I've got so many different sort of resources that I can share. I'm going to put my email up at the end that I would be so happy to share with you. Something that when I went to go and see my head teacher, he said, oh yeah, I thought it was weird. I went into the living room the other day and my sons were sat on the sofa watching FIFA, and it was on Sky Sports. And that's when someone said that, and I think in the last panel, that was when it clicked for him, and he was like, this is massive, and after he had seen that, it didn't take a lot for me to sort of start it in school, but that's the main thing that you need your senior management team to be supportive. I've been super lucky in that sense. Befriending IT support, of course you need the IT support. I'm in the middle of securing IT support for getting back into school. Right now we're playing from home, which is really good, but we want to have it set up and ready for those kids so it's seamless transition back into classroom life and keeping the esports team running. And reach out to other schools. Please reach out to me. I didn't have another Scottish school to reach out to, but it was an English school who I reached out to from the British Esports, and we emailed back and forward, and he gave me so many amazing tips for starting out. I don't think I could have done it without him. So hopefully, if anyone's sitting there thinking, I just need someone to talk to about it for a start, you can email me, and I'll just pop my email up there. So it's cleliston@glow.sk.uk. And you can honestly, please send me an email. I'd love to hear from people who are sort of on the fence about starting up an esports team for their school. I can share resources. I've put up a couple of other things that really helped me when I first started. And that's really it. The challenge is just making sure that you've got the kids, which you will, they love it, and getting support from senior management. Once you've got that, it's a well-oiled machine and it'll run very smoothly. So that's me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. My goodness, that was incredibly inspirational. And looking at the chat, I think you're going to get about 200 emails by the end of the day.
That's good. I will reply as fast as I can.
But it is incredible to hear this story, and in such detail as well, to get a sense of what it is that really makes this so valuable for the pupils as well. And I think that aspect of taking the sort of passion for gaming that they have and transforming it into something incredibly enriching for their lives and collaborative is just wonderful. I wonder whether you might just sort of mention like the detail of what are your sort of what is your club like? What do you do within the sessions? How do you sort of work with the students? Is it pretty much setting up events, or how do you sort of guide them?
Yeah, so as I said, it's definitely not difficult to get them online, to get them playing. The difficulty comes in creating something that works within a sort of group, and they are getting round to that. We have basically our competitive day and we have our casual day. So on a Wednesday after school, when the British Esports games are running, that's our competitive day. So I'll usually check in with the teams at the beginning of the week and just say, is everyone okay? Here's the times, and they're pretty good at just getting on with it. They love the competitive aspect of it. They have never seen these kids so driven to make sure that, make sure everyone's on time. The captains are all like atting their entire team, making sure that they're all ready. It's just really good to see such teamwork. And then, we do a Friday after school casual, which actually started before the pandemic. We had a bunch of Xboxes, which we couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. We didn't have that yet, but the kids were like, well, we'll go and research some games that we don't need to play. And then suddenly you've got 10 kids all around the one sort of big TV, the one Xbox, passing the controller around because they're playing Worms Armageddon, which is not really a competitive game, but they absolutely loved it. And it wasn't a game that they'd all really ever played before, but because it was what we had available, they made it work. And, the casual one is really just, we do little like in-house games. We do little fun tournaments where you can, and the prizes are usually silly things like you get to pick a role in the Discord and then you'll appear online as that role and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing. They love it for what it is. So that's really how we've done it so far.
And do you have pupils from all ages? What sort of range do you have within the club?
Yeah, we do. We have, we did open it originally for senior phase just to get into, just to work with small groups, to work with, how is this going to work? And then we've sort of opened it up to the BGE. We actually have a couple of S1 pupils in our sort of group now. There's one of our S1 pupils who is on one of our Rocket League teams as well, which is, and they're playing with S5s. And he said to me when I first said, would you like to join this team? I think he was very good at the game, sort of high diamond. I thought, you should be on a team. I know you're still young, but you should be on a team. You need to get into that. And he was like, oh, I'm kind of scared to play with the S5s. That's a very, very daunting thing for an S1. But they've been so accommodating to him, and it's those connections that usually wouldn't happen in a school. From these different massive gap of age range usually wouldn't happen, but it's been a really nice buddying system. His confidence has grown. The S5s have gained from helping this person get into the scene. So no, it's been fab for all ages so far.
Well, thanks so much for being here and sharing your story. And I know that there's so many comments in the chat, and you might have to actually paste your email into the chat, because I know for my screen it wasn't too clear what the email was. So if you have,
I don't know how to get to the chat. I talk about games, but I don't know how to get to the chat. But I think I've managed to get it now. Yeah, I will put my email in the chat. I promise.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Em, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So moving on to our next speaker and our final speaker for this morning session is Brian Clark from Education Scotland. And I think, as Chester mentioned at the beginning of this morning, having support from a range of government stakeholders in building these new educational programs and what Emma described as this kind of new age of entertainment is so crucial, because I think helping people understand that what we're doing here is creating industries for the future and the skills that are needed to make those productions remarkable. So welcome, Brian. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here. I'll just quickly introduce myself.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have so many teachers in this event today. I mean, and I know that you have a background in teaching as well, and it's great to have those advocates in the esports world. So over to you, and we'll have a chat afterwards.
Great. Right, thanks very much. So, hello, thank you very much for having me. So my name is Brian Clark, and I'm Senior Education Officer at Education Scotland. But before I start my presentation, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. So previous to coming to Education Scotland, I was deputy head teacher in a high school, and previous to that, I was principal teacher of computing in another high school. But previous to that, I worked with Learning and Teaching Scotland on the game-based learning program that they did called the Consolarium. So for a couple of years, around about 2007 time, I was deeply involved with how commercially available computer games could be used within the curriculum to help, situate learning or to frame learning using new media. And, that's obviously it was a great opportunity for me to kind of work with that team. But it's also kind of, sits close to my own heart. So being a previous computing kind of student at university in the 90s, I was forever going to LAN parties and carting around desktop computers and playing Doom with four of my pals with a whole pile of wires and network boxes in someone's flat. And now being a dad of a 9-year-old, watching my son play Fortnite with his friends and teaming up in team rumbles and having strategies to try and win. It's really exciting. So today, I'd like to talk a little bit around about games in the curriculum from the education perspective, but also just a few observations that I personally have around about esports and gaming. So I'll try and stick to 10 minutes and where it's getting close to lunch, and I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along. So if this will move to my next slide. There we go. So in most school libraries, for years and years and years, there's probably been boxes of board games, and no one ever thought twice about pupils going to the library and playing a board game. There's probably board game clubs in your school, chess clubs, and no one thinks twice about those things happening, because they are the situations that allow people to connect and to talk and to play with like-minded individuals. And that's been the case for many, many years. And even at home, when I was, again, at university, we used to play Risk and Monopoly with my flatmates, and it caused all sorts of arguments and the like, but it was this idea of kind of being together and communicating and having a strategy and embedding various skills, whether it be with chess or numeracy or whatever it might be. But then, even when you look at the virtual world, the kind of gaming world, since the Atari came out, it was always advertised as a family gaming entertainment system. So don't just watch the television, play it. And most of the adverts that came out back when the Atari came out, and even now when you're seeing PS5 and Nintendo Switch adverts, a lot of it is to do with family and about groups playing together and connecting and being together. I think that from an education perspective, that idea to connect and to communicate and to have success in a domain is hugely important, and it's a great skill to build confidence with individuals. So before I go on to kind of talk a little about that, I felt we'll have to mention the pandemic, and I know maybe one of William's colleagues maybe will even know this Dr. Galloway from Aberdeen University. I saw this on the BBC News site about the Deluxe festival that happened in Dumfries that was about mental health and video gaming. And this article also talks a lot about over the pandemic how important video gaming was to make connections with people and for people not to feel isolated. And over that time, I saw on Twitter a number of teachers talking about esports teams and requests from pupils saying, can we start esports teams? I'm not quite sure anything happened on the back of those things, but I just remember seeing on my Twitter feed these kind of conversations happening. So it was obviously the kind of area that everyone was becoming to get more interested in, or certainly accepting more. Everyone accepts board games and chess clubs and playing games with your family in the house, but over the pandemic, that connection with other people became more important and perhaps more culture sat within the cultural framework of individuals, because we're all on Zoom calls, we're all talking to each other. And I must admit, at that point, it wasn't until the pandemic started that my wife and I decided that maybe it was okay for our son, who's kind of P5, P6, to actually speak to his friends online and play together, because all that areas around, internet safety and how to cope with, internet bullies or trolls or those types of things, are always a worry for every parent. And what we realised is that this was actually a way for us to help teach some of those skills within a kind of a walled garden type of approach, because the way we set up the parental controls within these Switch games and things. And honestly, it was I think a revelation for me, even someone who was into gaming and playing, but seeing the emotional support and social support he got during that time was huge. And I can see why schools perhaps started to look at those types of approaches. The other interesting thing about this is that it reminded me of a book that James Bulgee wrote back in 2007 called What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. And what he talked about in there was an idea called semiotic domains. And he explains that as an area of study or an area in which an individual inhabits the space because they understand the laws and the rules within that space. They understand the interactions. And gaming, for young people, that is their semiotic domain. And then when we have teaching as a set of classroom teachers, the classroom is our domain. No matter how much autonomy we want to give to pupils, they will still see the classroom as being the domain of the teacher, whereas gaming culturally sits within the domain of the learners. So there was always real kind of scope for gaming to intersect with learning. And I'll touch on that briefly in just a second. But what I want to do at this point was just have a look at some of the aspects of Scotland's curriculum. And recently the curriculum was refreshed into kind of saying, this is the refreshed curriculum narrative. And there are 4 areas of the refreshed curriculum narrative for learners to experience. So opportunities of personal achievement, interdisciplinary learning, ethos and life of the school, and curriculum and subjects. And I just picked out one part of this, and it's the opportunities of personal achievement. And on the screen there, this is essentially a right of all pupils in Scotland. So personal achievement provides children and young people with a sense of satisfaction and helps to build motivation, resilience and confidence. So that's just one thing I want to touch on, and then follow it up very quickly with other parts of our curriculum. So literacy across learning, English literacy, has definitions of texts within Scottish education. And you can see the list that's there, and there's a lot of traditional texts that are there, but I've highlighted in red, it says games. And this is where a lot of the work that I did with the Consularium to begin with was around using games as a contextual hub to situate learning, to use the rich narrative that were in games to help with literacy and those types of things. When we came to things like, game design as part of the curriculum, we talked about narrative, and we talked about bringing together aspects of the curriculum, such as literacy, such as music, such as art, to kind of use those multidisciplinary skills to create games. And that was something that's always been picked up on, and across the country in most computing departments, for example, there you'll find that in S1 and S2 there's some kind of form of game design unit. The SQA have courses for games design, so you can do a National Progression Award in games design. So that thread of the development of games has grown in Scottish education, and as was mentioned by the previous speakers, there is a number of routes into further and higher education which is to do with game design, and that's been established for a number of years now. Congratulations, Aberdeen, my old university, by the way. I went to Aberdeen University between 93 and 97. So there we go. So there's obviously, historically, there's been that kind of development progression, which leads me to kind of then think about, the conversations that I've heard both Aberdeen and Clyde College talking about there about, the development of esports pathways. And actually, there is the ability for us to look at the existing curriculum within Scotland to see where those types of pathways might sit. Indeed, with developing the young workforce as one of the main threads about kind of preparing young people for jobs that don't exist yet, that age-old thing. Esports as a career and the associated roles within an esports team, that is a realistic goal for a number of young people now. And again, I'll touch on that in a slide or two. The one thing that I did also want to mention was that within the curriculum, this slide was meant to go first and I just totally forgot to put it first, is the health and well-being area. So if you're not familiar with Scottish education in schools, there's a number of curriculum areas, and all the curriculum areas have what we call experiences and outcomes. And I've just listed some of the experience and outcomes at different levels, all the way from early years through to about the end of S3, which is level 4, which is about health and well-being. And if you can see it there, it says, no, I value the opportunities I'm given to make friends and be part of a group in a range of situations. Through contributing my views, time and talents, I play a part in bringing about positive change in my school and community. Now, that's exactly what what's happening in Alva Academy. That whole idea of pupils that are perhaps not necessarily part of a traditional, sporting team or contributing to, Duke of Edinburgh Awards or that type of thing. They're actually being able to participate at a level that's actually been recognised. So I see everything that's been mentioned around esports in the last few presentations. There are natural links to where it can sit within the curriculum. I think it takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of bravery, I think, from schools to invest in some of that, particularly around kind of infrastructure and technology. Every local authority has ownership of their own networks and have final say on what's allowed and what's not within the GDPR and all that type of thing. So it's difficult for a national organisation like Education Scotland to do anything to support that type of approach, because it's up to local authorities. But there's always opportunities with local authorities and schools to shape the curriculum how they see fit. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of curriculum opportunities next. So, as I mentioned, from a secondary school perspective, that was where I was, and I was as a computing teacher. And you've got your kind of first to third year area, you've got broad general education, and you've got your senior phase. And generally speaking, as a computing teacher, there'd be some form, in between first and third year, there's probably some form of game design type experience which focuses on programming. And then often that will be linked to interdisciplinary type of activities, where if you've got a course in first or second year that's linked to business education or whatnot, you might do a marketing campaign about the game that you've developed, or you might write a bit of narrative or a backstory about the character within that game. So that's kind of what's currently just happening just now. But then after hearing about the plans in Abertay there for potential esports qualifications, all of a sudden the actual design of the game and the creation of the game doesn't necessarily then become the important part. Perhaps it's about event management. Perhaps it's about digital photography. Perhaps it's about digital media and preparing for live streaming and organising events and using that as a contextual hub for a piece of learning in the BGE. And there's absolutely scope within the curriculum framework for schools to be exploring that type of thing. And then in the senior phase, we've got things like the National Progression Awards in game design and the like. However, there are a number of other SEQF qualifications that are available, which again, if you take a think about the suite of qualifications available from SEQF, about things like event management and data science and digital media and game design, all those elements you could see leading as potential pathways into event management, into those game esports courses that were mentioned by William in Abertay. So how we shape our curriculum and our curriculum offer is really open in Scottish schools, and esports could be one of those routes that schools try to plan for in a formal sense as a pathway, or indeed figure out how to support that in an extracurricular sense, as was happening in Alva Academy. I had another couple of slides which was just going to point to a couple of other bits of research, but I'm going to just stop speaking there because I've got about 14 seconds remaining. But it's been lovely to speak to you. I'm really happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Brian, and thank you for wrapping up. What's been wonderful to hear you speak about is just the breadth of I guess, pedagogic underpinning to why esports is so valuable to pursue in a range of sort of educational settings. And I wonder whether your perspective sort of shows that there is growing support across the educational sector in this direction, or whether it's still important to get these messages across to a range of different people.
I think the curriculum is it's got wide walls and high ceilings, and schools across the country are responsible for designing the curriculum that best meets the needs for their learners. Now, I think with the impact of COVID and lockdown, a lot of schools are really considering what their curriculum offer can now look like, because we've been involved in, this online learning for the past 12 months on and off. And so there's now, I know, schools are asking themselves questions about, is our curriculum right? Can we do things differently? And when they start asking questions like that, they then begin to think of other opportunities that are available. You're hearing stories left, right, and centre about, I saw something on Amazon Prime the other day around about, McLaren. Was it the Formula One team recruited a gamer to be their test driver for their virtual simulator through a gaming competition? I'm seeing that BT Sport are streaming, FIFA Live. I mean, all these opportunities. Manchester United, the football team, have got an esports team where they sign people to play against other football teams. There's obviously, a growing area for success beyond school in the wider gaming industry that's not just associated to design and development, but the actual participation in an esports type team. Is it up to schools and local authorities to consider that? And if they can support it in partnership with others, then brilliant. Because the curriculum is, as I say, it's got wide walls and high ceilings.
And I think certainly that method of having opportunities to pursue personal development is such one aspect of this, not least because I think that certain ways of sort of living digital lives can be routes towards sort of really challenging experiences for young people. So if you can transform that into positive, enriching experiences through esports, that's got to be a really positive thing for people, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stop.
So yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's really just, I think, bringing that breadth of understanding about the value of game playing. And that's been a theme that we've heard a lot this morning about passion, fun, game playing. They're all kind of the essential components of the esports world, aren't they?
Absolutely. Sorry.
So I think that we are sort of really up to the wire now with lunchtime. So thank you so much for being here, Brian. It's a great way to conclude this morning, because I think having teachers, especially experienced teachers in leadership positions, talk about the value of esports is such a fundamental aspect of making progress, of involving more people, and especially, I think, getting people outside of the esports world to understand why it's valuable, why it's important to think about as a route into a range of educational opportunities for people. So thank you again for being here.